Good morning. It's the 13th day of September. You're watching AM Live in the Market, and I'm Olive Burrows. As is often said in the hip-hop world, we've got money on our minds as the country waits with bated breath for President Uhuru Kenyatta to show his hand with regard to the 16% value-added tax on petroleum. We discuss debt, the heavy debt burden which has been touted as the reason for the tax. Gwen Member of Parliament Alex Kosgei will be joining us to discuss the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill of 2018, a proposal to cap the debt ceiling at 6 trillion shillings, and which would see the National Assembly take on a much more active role, not just where government expenditure is concerned, but revenue generation as well. But first, let's look at what's making headlines. And in the Daily Nation today, we have Obado on the cover, and it says Obado owns up to Sharon affair. If you missed that story yesterday, you missed one hell of a story, but we'll be recapping that for you a little later. Of course, Kere Patney is back in the news. Kere say they want 2 billion shillings from Patney. Of course, and then in the counties, Wairia imposes water tax for Nairobi and Kiambu. And Wairia, if you're aware, has been involved in a tussle with the water body in Murang'a. All right, media gets protection in defamation cases. That is on page 2 of the Daily Nation, so you definitely want to grab your copy of that. We also have Chebukati on the paper. He says, we are proud of our work in last year's elections, and of course that is an issue that is up for debate. And then of course eyes on the regulator as he moves to set new fuel prices. Yesterday we had the CAS Treasury appear before the Senate Committee on Energy, and he testified that they are yet to receive the court order prohibiting or keeping them from imposing the 16% VAT tax. As we mentioned at the beginning, President Uhuru Kenyatta has a period of 14 days from the time when Parliament made the amendments to the finance bill to decide to either allow them to clear the amendments or not, to send it back to Parliament with a memo. So we wait on that. The clock is ticking on that. Still staying with that Obado story, several stories also on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation. We have Sharon forwarded chat messages to Obado's wife and son. That is on page 4 of the Daily Nation. Then we have Oyamo to be held for 14 more days. He was arraigned, first of all, if you're aware, in the Homa Bay Law Courts before he was brought to Nairobi yesterday, where he was arraigned before Justice Luka Kimaru, who granted the state 14 more days to complete investigations with Michael Oyamo, who is who's said to be the Migori governor's personal assistant, being held for 14 more days. But we have a story still on page 5. Staying with that Obado story, the family to bury Sharon's unborn child, and that is today, right there on the bottom of page 5 of the Daily Nation. As the family, it says the family to bury Sharon's unborn baby today, and they appeal to the president, yes, for justice. So those are the leading stories in the Daily Nation. Let's take a look at the Business Daily. Yes, the other big story from yesterday, CBK fines 5 banks 392 million shillings over the NYS scam, and the 5 banks have been identified as Stanchart Equity Bank, KCB, the Cooperative Bank, and the Diamond Trust Bank. I think 4 out of the 5 banks have released statements, if not all already, all saying they will comply with whatever the regulator decides. They've been given 14 days to respond to the charges that have been made against them, and that is only the first phase of investigations by the bank regulator into the NYS scam number 2. They say several more banks will be under the microscope, and criminal charges might be preferred based on what the DCI and the other investigative authorities find. Also, still on the cover of the Business Daily is that Obado story. It seems to be dominating headlines, and there he is with his wife Helen seated right by his side. There were comments yesterday regarding that body language between the two of them. Would like to get your thoughts on hashtag AM Live. That is on NTV Kenya. Yes, again, Uber. That is on page 2 of the Business Daily. Uber taxify drivers to strike over fares. Let us know if you have any issues this morning with that. But it's the strike that follows many other strikes that have taken place. We want to hear from the regulators what will be done to address those grievances. Still, yes, in economy and politics, that is page 5 of the Business Daily. The line row delays cheap wind power. That should be an interesting story for you to take a look at. And Treasury sees inflation up 2% on new fuel tax. So are you already feeling the impact of the fuel tax as you go about your business or as you make your purchases? And Sonko trails Kidero in collecting revenue. That's also in the Business Daily. On the back page, we have a few international stories in the Business Daily. Ethiopia, Eritrea reopen 2 border crossings, and it allows Addis Ababa now access to the sea, which it previously did not, following that spat between Ethiopia and Eritrea that started in 1998. Eritrea seceded from Ethiopia in 1991, but from around 1998, they were involved in tussle over the border. And that issue was resolved by the UN in 2000, but Ethiopia did not abide by the terms of that agreement with regard to the border. But of course, a lot of strides have been made in that regard in the last few weeks. And the Standard, their headline is how China is feeding off poor Africa. Quite the controversial headline. And there they have a dragon. Might be the Chinese dragon. I don't know whether you agree with them, but again, it sticks with our theme today, which is debt. And they say that huge debts, 20 trillion shillings, is the total amount of money China has lent Africa in infrastructure, manpower, and technological support. And 122 billion shillings is a total interest payable by Kenya on Chinese loans until 2021. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll be looking at the debt situation in the country and the proposals by the Gwen MP, Alex Kosgei, on what the debt ceiling should be. He proposes 6 trillion shillings. What are your thoughts on that issue? Also on the Standard, they also have the Obado story right on the top right corner there. Obado brings out family denies role in Sharon murder. Yesterday, he spoke at the Serena Hotel. He asked that the investigative authorities be given time to investigate, and he asked that they do so speedily. Also still on the front page of the Standard is the CBK finds 5 banks have been penalized. As we mentioned earlier, those 5 banks are Stanchart, we have KCB Bank, DTB, the Cooperative Bank, and Equity Bank. Those are the 5 banks that have been identified in the first phase of investigations as having violated regulations when dealing with the NYS scam number 2 cash. An interesting story on page 2, a story from the courts. The bank is ordered to give back auctioned home to siblings, and staying with the courts, road fines to start in November. The story says motorists will start paying instant fines for minor traffic offences after a month, the government has said. We'd also like to get your thoughts on that. Will it fix the problem of corruption on the road? Will it help unclog the courts as far as traffic offences are concerned, and maybe make the justice wheels move faster? And of course, again, there's that story in more detail about Obado. The headline says, "My family public knew about Sharon." That should be quite the interesting read. And then, of course, there's the 2 who were charged yesterday over the shooting of the former CEC for Garissa, Idris Mukhtar. They were charged yesterday. They are the 2 suspects who are charged are Mohammed Hussein Aden and Juliet Charity Njoki. You will recall that the main suspect in the murder is said to have hung himself while in police custody. An autopsy was conducted, and it was determined that he died via or through asphyxiation. Well, those are the main headlines. Those are the main stories that have made headlines in the newspapers today. We'll delve a little bit deeper into what else is contained in the paper a bit later. Let's look at what's making news internationally. Internationally, in the U.S., mass evacuations from a storm of a lifetime. The storm has been downgraded slightly, but is still extremely dangerous and packing 125 mph winds. Apple unveils iPhone XS and a new watch, and the phone costs as much as $999 US. I'd like to know your thoughts on that. Would you part with that much money for a phone, and given its new features? Let's have a look at that. So it is the iPhone XS and XS Max. So the details are that the iPhone XS Max has a 6.5-inch display. The iPhone XS has the same 5.8-inch size component as the original, but the iPhone XR screen is 6.1 inches but is lower quality. So would you pay that much? Like I said, the amount there had been concerns that the relatively high amount of £999 entry price of the iPhone X would limit its appeal. Would you pay that much for the phone? Have you had a chance to look at it or have a chance to look at the specs online? That's a very interesting story. In fact, it's trending on Twitter. We'll get some of your reactions to those stories that aired yesterday, particularly the Obado story. Let's get a few reactions to that particular story in just a second. And this is Mwavu, who says, anyone who preys on young women deserves no seat on the governance table. And he hopes that justice is done for the family of Sharon. As I mentioned earlier, the family plans to lay to rest her unborn child today. Well, let's look at some of those stories that aired yesterday. Let's listen to what Obado had to say. So here are the highlights. NYS2 Pepper Trail lands banks in trouble. CBK slaps 5 banks with 392 million shillings. Well, as you heard from all the headlines that are on the papers today, Migori Governor Okoth Obado has finally spoken about the death of Rongo University student Sharon Otieno, calling on his fellow politicians and the media to desist from what he calls a primitive assault on his character, seemingly to implicate him in her death. Obado, who was in the company of his wife Helen and their 2 children, presented the face of a family tormented by the death of the young woman. Sharon Otieno's murder case, here's what he had to say.
The short walk to the lawns of the Serena Hotel, Nairobi, Wednesday afternoon must have seemed long for the Obado family. The head of the family and Migori Governor Okoth Obado sandwiched between his aides while his family walked behind him. One would only be left to speculate if it was only the glare of the sun on Helen Obado's face that gave her a frown, or much more than that has hung over the family over the last week.
We are indeed at our very, very lowest in life. So, at usingizi hakuna, at appetite hakuna, we are at our very, very lowest.
The Obado family, though quiet on this afternoon, sent out a message of a family standing behind their head at a moment in time when the air is filled with speculation over his involvement with the deceased.
I want to state here very, very clearly and very categorically that have nothing and absolutely nothing to do with the cruel death of Sharon.
The Migori governor, who has already been questioned over the death of student Sharon Otieno, could neither confirm nor deny being acquainted to the student, but is now sorry for her death and insists that it is important for all the relevant authorities to investigate the matter as soon as possible.
And even you, members of the press, you know very well. That is why I talked about the medieval punishments. You know very well that for you, or if it is not some big character, then it is not news. And that is why maybe there's that tendency of shifting so that you get the juicier part of it. One of my daughters here.
The 5-minute press conference ended with an introduction to his family. His daughter Evelyn and son Jerry seated on their father's left, while Helen, his wife, sat quietly on his right, bowing her head and seeming to wipe her face from time to time and glancing at her children.
Asante sana.
The family left the venue with the governor in front, managing to wear a smile as he chatted with his aides, his lawyer Cliff Fombetta in tow, with the wife and children tagging along further behind. He did change his expression when he left the hotel lobby, boarding his vehicle and leaving. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
That story, there is a top story on the Daily Nation today. Parents of slain Rongo University student Sharon Otieno continue to demand justice as they prepare to bury the remains of Sharon's unborn child on Thursday. This even as the High Court in Nairobi ruled that Michael Oyamo, one of the key suspects in the murder, be detained for 14 days at the Muthaiga police station in Nairobi to allow the prosecution enough time to complete investigations.
His rights and fundamental freedoms that are guaranteed by the Constitution shall be protected. He shall be allowed access to his counsel during daytime. His relatives, who shall be vetted, shall also be granted access to see him. You shall be charged, or you may be charged with murder contrary to Section 203, as read with Section 204 of the Penal Code of the Laws of Kenya. And the particulars of the offense are that between 3rd and 4th September 2018 at Owande area, Rachonyo, South Sub-County within Homa Bay County, jointly with others not before court, you murdered Sharon Beryl Otieno.
Another story making headlines, the Central Bank of Kenya has fined 5 commercial banks a total of 392 million shillings for violating financial transaction rules stemming from the National Youth Service Scandal 2. The 5 banks handled a total of 3.5 billion from the NYS, and as NTV's Mel Miendo reports, this is only the first phase of investigations, with the regulator prioritizing banks with the largest NYS cash flows.
When the second NYS scandal broke out in May 2018, it emerged that at least 6 banks were used in transacting 3.5 billion shillings of the estimated 9 billion shillings of NYS proceeds. At the time, CBK Governor Patrick Njoroge gave his word that the regulator would punish banks involved, terming the loss of funds as unreasonably excessive.
It's not an issue of enforcement or lack of understanding. It is an issue of maybe people not following the guidelines deliberately or deliberately, because how else could you make a mistake that on things that you are completely aware of?
Investigations into which banks were involved in the NYS scam had begun at the time. Now, 4 months down the line, and a penalty of a lump sum 392 million has been charged to 5 banks involved in the NYS transactions. The banks include Standard Chartered Bank, Equity Group, KCB Group, Cooperative Bank of Kenya and Diamond Trust Bank. Of the 5, Stanchart handled the largest transaction of NYS proceeds of 1.6 billion. CBK has fined it 77.5 million, followed by Equity with 886 million of NYS proceeds to pay a fine of 89.5 million shillings. KCB handled 639 million from NYS and has been fined 149.5 million, while Cooperative Bank handled 263 million and is set to pay a fine of 20 million shillings. DTB handled the least amount from NYS proceeds at 162 million and will pay a fine of 56 million. KCB is the highest penalized bank of the 5, while Cooperative is the least. According to CBK, this is the first phase of the investigation, where the banks in question violated the requirements of Kenya's anti-money laundering, combating financing of terrorism laws and regulations, including failure to report large cash transactions, failure to undertake adequate customer due diligence,
lack of supporting documentation for large transactions, and lapses in the reporting of suspicious transaction to the Financial Reporting Center. In a statement, the regulator states, and I quote, CBK has discussed the detailed findings with boards of directors and senior management of each of the banks. Each has expressed their strong commitment to be fully compliant on all aspects of the law and addressing the identified lapses through time-bound action plans. These action plans will be submitted to the CBK within 14 days, and CBK will closely monitor their implementation. End of quote. In addition, CBK has shared the findings with the relevant investigative agencies, and an additional set of banks will also be identified and investigated. Malmiendo, NTV.
Staying with money matters, counties are now opting for locally collected revenues and bank loans to service operations as a cash crunch bites the devolved units. Governors warn that failure by the National Treasury to release funds could cripple operations. The sentiments come even as they launched fresh attacks on the National Assembly for slashing functions and funds sent to counties.
Contractors are shying away from counties because they know that it takes long before money is dispersed from the National Treasury to counties. However, because of that, we realize that also those contractors who have taken advantage and finished their work early enough, they've been able to be paid.
All indications are kwa wakati fulani itabidi tuachilie wafanyikazi wengine waende manyumbani.
The past 7 months we've not been faring very well, and that is why we have been pending bills from the previous financial years, and we've only been able to pay salaries for the past 3-4 months. And I think the challenge of cash flows in Kenya is real, and the counties are bearing the brunt, and unfortunately this has also compromised our ability to undertake development.
The Council notes with concern that despite the high-level negotiations and the signing of an agreement, the national government failed to honor its end of the bargain, and the counties have continued to grapple with the same challenges they have experienced over the last 5 years.
Now for some news from the business sector. A row is brewing between 4 senior staff of Citon Investments and Britam, the company where they used to work before branching out to set up Citon. On Tuesday, Britam successfully managed to have a case in which the 4 are accused of having had oversight over the irregular transfer of 1.2 billion shillings taken to full trial. Citon's chief executive, Edwin Dande, has disagreed with the ruling, stating that he and his team will tackle the matter head-on in order to exonerate themselves completely. The case stems from the acrimonious departure of the 4 individuals from Britam to establish their own firm, Citon Investments. In a statement, Dande says the reason the 4 left Britam is because they could not be party to malpractices that they were being prevailed upon to execute. Well, some residents living within border regions have devised an ingenious method of mitigating against the high cost of fuel as a result of the recent imposition of VAT. It started with residents of Busia heading to Uganda to buy cheaper fuel, and now those in Moyale are following suit. NTV's Ahmed Maulid tells us more from Mandera County.
This petrol station located in downtown Moyale town was once busy, but now it sits empty. The recent hike in the cost of fuel has led to motorists staying away. Since the 16% VAT on fuel came into effect days ago, petrol stations across Moyale town have suffered dwindling customer numbers, as many of them say they can no longer afford the commodity.
Sasa tunataka funga sasa. Kuna namna ni tufunga tu. Pesa mingi tulitoa kwa hii kazi karibu milioni 10 na kadhaa. Sasa iko shida kama hiyo.
Motorists have opted to cross the border into Ethiopia, where fuel is much cheaper, retailing at 70 shilling per litre. The same fuel on the Kenyan side of the border goes for between 140 shilling and 150 shilling per litre.
Sana ile shida yenye tunapata hapo kwa tuktuk ni shida ya mafuta.
Mafuta bei ya hapa Kenya ni 150, kule Ethiopia tunanunua na 70. Mainly huwa tunavuka the other side kujaza tank ndio tukuje kufanya hapa, na hiyo bado inatukost kutumia hiyo mafuta, na hiyo mafuta ndio means ya kutafuta nayo riski zingine.
Hapo ni 150, huko ni 70 kwa huko. Sasa tunakimbia sasa ile bei rahisi sana, ndio sisi tunakimbia boda.
In other major towns in Madera County like Takaba sub-county, vehicles and motorbikes are getting reprieve in Ethiopia because of its proximity and lower fuel prices. Ahmed Abdi, NTV, Moyale, Marsabit County.
Qatar Airways will launch direct flights to Mombasa in December. The entry of the Middle East carrier into the coastal route is expected to provide stiff competition for local carriers and at the same time promote tourism. Qatar will use an Airbus A320 for the flights from Doha to Mombasa and will have 4 flights each week. It joins Ethiopian Airlines, Turkish Airlines and Rwandair as the international carriers that fly directly to Mombasa. Kenya and the Democratic Republic of Congo are set to sign an economic cooperation agreement to strengthen the ties between the two nations. Deputy President William Ruto is in Brazzaville to witness the signing of the agreement with the Central African country. Among the sectors the agreement will open up trade opportunities to include mining, agriculture, science and technology. Security matters are also set to take center stage during Ruto's visit. The two countries will establish a joint cooperation commission which will be chaired by their respective foreign affairs ministers. The commission will monitor and evaluate the implementation of the programs under the Cooperation Pact and give proposals on ways to deepen relations.
Very good. Welcome. You're well.
The European Parliament on Wednesday approved a controversial European Union copyright law that hands more power to news and record companies against internet giants like Google and Facebook. Backing the draft were traditional media in urgent search of revenue at a time when web users shun newspapers and TV and advertising. Mgwen in the house. Karibu. We are also joined by Anthony Kirori, who's the founder and CEO of Green Pencils Limited. Thank you very much for being here. And from the chamber, yes, and from the chamber, the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry is James Mureu. Karibu sana. And finally, but last but not least is what they say, right? We have George Washuri from the Optiven Group. As I mentioned a bit earlier, we are discussing the amendments proposed by the Honorable Member of Parliament to the Public Finance Management Act. You intend, or rather you propose, that we cap the debt ceiling in the country at 6.3 trillion shillings. And of course, it's a pertinent issue that comes up. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at your Standard today, and their top story is how China is feeding off poor Africa. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that headline, George?
No, it's Anthony.
Yes, Anthony, I'm so sorry.
Yes. Actually, what I'm going to say may sound bad, may be forgiven for that. Let me start with that right there. If you do not plan yourself, others people will plan you. So basically, look at China. They are more Chinese, so to speak, than Africans. Their resources are dwindling. Africa is open, so to speak. And if we've not put enough policies to protect ourselves, then they'll come and walk over us. And that is very unfortunate. So what we need to do is we need to put policies and laws in effect to protect ourselves first. Because if you have resources that I need and mine are dwindling, and you are, forgive me to say, careless with your resources, why won't we walk over you?
Okay.
That's how I see it.
Now, James, as a chamber, what are your thoughts on that headline? Is it fair? Is it a fair depiction of the current situation?
Yes, yes and no. Yes, because I think we are in this situation because we have failed to plan. And they say if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. And so for me, what Mheshimiwa is doing is actually now asking the country to plan so that you limit yourself and operate within your means. There is a saying that you must not live beyond your means. And what we have been doing right now is we've been living beyond our means, where I can easily plan to have a sumptuous meal, courtesy of Mheshimiwa here, without caring whether he has any money in his pocket. And that's what basically we're doing. So when you see, we go to China, and I've discussed this issue here with the BAL, about the debt, the growing debt of this country. And I was actually lucky to have had Governor Drito Mredhi from Laikipia and Gabriel Legatu from ADB. They all seem to hold the view that we have not reached an alarming rate of borrowing. And I flagged that long time ago, and I said, sorry guys, we are continuing in the wrong trajectory. Because if you borrow for consumption, then you're borrowing for the wrong reason. If you borrow for development and infrastructure, then and channel that money that way, then you're borrowing for the good reason. So we've seen it coming, and unfortunately, we've hit a place. We've come to a moment of reckoning now, where the whole problem has dawned on us now that finally we have to deal with it now. We've ignored it. You wished it away, but we have to deal with it now. It's a very difficult moment because we are caught between the rock and the hard place. If you don't increase, you're down. If you increase, you're down. It's a very, very difficult time for this country. And really, we must weigh in and tell ourselves which way do we go. And, of course, I've also weighed in on this issue about what the government needs to do. And that is to put in austerity measures. This is the time when we must define ourselves as a country and say, fine, this is where we are, at a crossroad where we must sacrifice now certain things, certain luxuries, to be able to weather this. It's
interesting that you say that. Yesterday we carried a story with regard to Nairobi MCAs retreating to Mombasa, while at the same time casting aspersions on the Speaker of the National Assembly, of the County Assembly,
absolutely
saying she traveled first class as opposed to business class. But it seems they're all on the same page about austerity, as long as it doesn't affect our particular lifestyles. Now, George, yes.
It's a very interesting headline.
Yes.
Because Africa, we are very wealthy in assets, but poor in cash. So I think it's a high time, not necessarily the government, even as business people, that we need to stop even importing eggs from China and toys from China. Because the little money, the little cash we have, we spend it importing things that we can be able to produce from here in Kenya. And I think we, as Kenyan people, we need discipline. Our government needs discipline, because there's a limit, as Mureu says, that you can borrow. Right now, we are in cash 22. We have the loans that we cannot service. That's why the poor Wajiko is now suffering and yelling because of the high taxes. And we must walk this very tough walk. And for us in business, a lot is happening because we are feeling the pinch of the VAT. Okay,
before I come back to Mheshimiwa, because I'd like to sort of explain your motivation for the bill, and does it have to do with the heavy debt burden that we are discussing. So we've gotten the thoughts of our panelists. I'd like to also hear your thoughts. Our Twitter handle is NTV Kenya, that is on Twitter. We also want your thoughts on Facebook, that is NTV Kenya as well. The hashtag is AM Live. Gentlemen, are you on Twitter?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so what's your Twitter handle, Mheshimiwa? Sorry? At Keegan Kosgei. Okay, if you want to tweet Mheshimiwa or tag him in one of your tweets, so that's at Keegan Kosgei. Anthony?
At Anthony.Kirori.
At Anthony.Kirori.
Kirori, Kirori.
Okay, Kirori.
Yes,
Am I saying it right?
Yeah, you're saying
yes,
it. Well done.
Fantastic. James?
At James.
At James?
Mureu. Yeah, at James.Mureu.
Okay, James.Mureu. And George?
George Optiven.
George Optiven.
Yes.
Okay, there you have it. Mine is at O Burrows. Okay, fantastic. So, Mheshimiwa, is what caused you to wake up and write to the speaker and draft this bill and say you would like Parliament, or rather the National Assembly, to have more of a say where debt is concerned?
Yeah. Well, you see, what we have now is a very serious situation, and it's getting even out of hand. The issue to do with what you were discussing about China, it's an issue of sovereignty. It's an issue of us as a country being able to plan and be able to manage our own finances in a responsible manner. And what is independence and sovereignty comes in, it has its responsibilities and it has its privileges. And one of the responsibilities that you must manage your finances in a proper manner. If you do not, you risk your country, you risk a lot of things. In fact, one of the stories that has come out this time in the paper at the moment is a country like Sri Lanka has been forced to cede a port to China, and now they no longer own a part of their sovereign territory because of debt. Now, because of issues like that, it's entirely possible in future for us as Kenya to also be able to also have to cede parts of our country or parts of certain things that we own at the moment because of debt. So it was clear that we have to figure out at which point is this debt going to reach. It was also clear that the law seems to have a gap in not providing a ceiling, and that's why we propose this amendment to the Public Finance Management Act, which will cap the debt at a particular level. It's still open for debate because we have just proposed it, and we hope we can get views from the public and other people and be able to reach a consensus and an agreement about where this debt will reach and at what point do we feel that this is satisfactory. But it's not just an issue about the debt, because the debt is just one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that the Treasury needs to cut back also on its spending. What you just said is that there need to be very, very, very serious measures put in place to reduce their spending so that we can balance our budget, so that we can be able to live within our means, and we can be able to actually have a future which is fair to the children and other people as they come forward. And then the final part, because people say if you reduce government spending, how will you achieve growth? What really needs to be done is that the private sector needs to be supported, because that is actually the engine for growth. And if we can get proper support for the private sector, if the Treasury can reduce its spending, and then if we cap our debt,
then we have a bright future moving forward.
Okay, James, can I bring you in at that point?
Yes.
He says the private sector needs to be facilitated, so to speak, right? Given support. In what way are you not receiving that support?
Very good. First of all, let me applaud Mheshimiwa's very thoughtful decision to bring in. I mean, time had come when we needed to put some discipline to our ways of living. And we're living larger than life, as it were, banking on somebody else's effort. And I think that is what is driving. I can feel him even when he speaks. That is really what is driving the whole agenda. But the truth is, first of all, we are holding this country in trust for the future generation. And what we're doing now is plundering it in the hope that somebody else will come and fix it. What George has said here about China blackmailing and picking up resources left, right, and center. These last 2 weeks, if you followed news, you'll see every country now is in trouble. And this list of countries that have huge debts to China are all in the brink of going the Sri Lankan way. We are all heading, unless we have a Marshall Plan, a serious debate on what needs to be done, then we are headed up in the same direction as Sri Lanka. What I agree with Mheshimiwa also is, if you look at countries like Ghana, for example, in order for them to spur serious growth in their country, the president has come in with the reverse of what we're doing. The president of Ghana has lowered the taxes on raw materials for production. They have lowered the taxes on raw material, on equipment that are going towards manufacturing. And what that means is, if you can spur that economic growth, that economic activity, then you will be coming to more people that are able to pay their taxes. And when you are well endowed, when you have collected enough money, what will stop you from not paying? Right now, the situation we're faced with is very grave. Very, very grave. So grave that people are actually borrowing money to pay government taxes. Can you believe this? Yeah. And you're borrowing to pay taxes to a government that owes you money. It's a paradox. That the government right now owes the private suppliers, businessmen, and about upwards of 220 billion. Now, 220 billion is money that's out of circulation. If the government paid to the business community that money, actually 30% of that comes back to the government as corporation tax. So the 71 billion they're looking for is what they have not paid us to be able to collect. That's the truth. Okay. And finally, I also want to say this, that by so doing, the government continues to push its limit. And if you remember, ladies and gentlemen, when the president was the finance minister of this country, he actually put in some austerity measures and removed the guzzlers from the streets. The government was not using the 4.7 liter engines in their government operations. He brought in the Passats 1.8 liter, which cut down the cost of fuel and the maintenance of these vehicles for a long time. But immediately became president, he forgot, and now they are back and they have chased cars, and that is what we are saying is reckless spending. Even as we say we might consider this 16% VAT because it's really a very, very sorry state, can the government show us what they are doing to mitigate this situation? They can't just keep saying pay, 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 pay. At the moment, they're also collecting only 17%. 17% of taxes from those people that actually are tax compliant. What's happened to the 83%? There are people out there who are not paying taxes, but KRA is sitting comfortably because they know where Moreo is, because they know where George is. They'll hammer you until you drop there. Right. And there's a cartoon I'll send you where a donkey has been lifted by the load because, you've just been giving it loads and loads, and now it can't take you. Your load is down here, and the donkey can't step on the ground to deliver the load. That's where we are as a country.
Okay, so Anthony and George, being entrepreneurs,
yes.
Do you ever find yourselves in the same position as the donkey that has been?
I think I agree, because once you're in public limelight, you are target of a Kenya Revenue Authority. So they check every transaction you do, and we are paying too much. Remember, the same government that is borrowing is also borrowing from the local banks where Optiven borrows to pay the loans. They are borrowing about 30 billion from the local bank. That means if Optiven goes to borrow the money, the bank will be comfortable lending the government because Optiven is riskier. Government is safer.
Yes.
So we are suffering. That's why we find that especially for small, medium enterprises, they are not able to access money, even at the capping of the loan. And what is happening is that if you have a small loan, you cannot be able to expand your business. You have no working capital. And what happens? Unemployment. That's why you find that the rate of death of medium and small enterprises in Kenya is so high. They say from 2012 to 2016, we lost about 2.2 million businesses. They closed down. Completely. This year, more are closing down. Why? We cannot access finances from the banks because the banks are so comfortable lending to the government to pay China. This is very, 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 very serious. And we are talking about employment, especially for the youth, which we say we have 26% unemployment levels for the youth. We are not going to achieve this if we are not careful on our spending as a government. We are not careful as spending as the people of Kenya. So we need to turn around, and we must thank the Mheshimiwa for taking courage. I'm happy he's a young guy. He understands what young people suffer. And that is the way to go. Because this issue of the 16% VAT issue, it was done by other fellows who are not in parliament, 2013. So they did not foresee the future. And we will call upon our leadership to see the future. George is here for a few years. My children need this nation. We need this nation intact, not a nation that is picked up by China and others, because they say the borrower have no choices. They will come and take up our ports, take up our airport, and our children will be left as slaves.
Okay. Anthony, what's your experience?
Okay. More or less what he said. However, I'm thinking, if you may allow me, we dwell a bit on some of what I think are the solutions. For instance, like this 16% fuel levy. It is a catch-22 in the sense that, from what I've seen in the papers, the IMF cushion is expiring tomorrow.
Yeah.
If we withdraw the 16% fuel levy to another 2 years, it means we are not going to pay them for another 2 years. If they remove, they are the guarantor. If they remove the cushion, what happens to our shilling? So it devalues. If it devalues, price of fuel, price of everything will go up. Cost of living will be excessively high.
It already has, according to what's in the Business Daily today. They're saying inflation is up by 2%.
Exactly. Now, even if it was postponed by another 2 years, what will happen when those 2 years get finished? We'll be where we are right now. And that's why I think we need to start thinking of solutions. One of the things I'm thinking that the government should do, and I'm happy there's a honorable member here. Yes? I think what the president should do and the National Assembly is that this 16% VAT, instead of pushing it for another 2 years, stagger it in 4 years. Let Parliament create a law that will allow them to stagger the payment in 4 years, meaning each year will be paying 4%. And then, at the beginning, let's say we start this year. We don't start the month of September or October. Let's say, because now September is almost done. Let's say start in October. Let's not start in October by imposing the 4%. No, 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 no. A year has 12 months. Divide it into 4. Those are 3 months. 3 quarters, that is. Can we impose 1% per quarter? And then let's look for what I call the conducive movements. For instance, ERC tomorrow is going to, I hope they're not going to increase the fuel.
They will.
They most likely will. But however, maybe in the next 2-3 months, let me give a hypothetical figure. Let's assume the cost of fuel is 102 shillings. Then, because of the strengthening of our shilling and because of the good decisions that the country has made, the fuel goes down to 100 shillings. So we are saving 2 bob, and everybody will be happy. At that time, let government now impose a 1% tax, because a 1% tax of 100 shillings is 101. If I've been paying 102 shillings, and then I'm told I'll be paying 101 instead of 102, but in that 101 shillings, there is a 1% VAT. Trust me, I will not complain. And then every 14th of the month, ERC should be telling us that this last 30 days or 31 days, whatever it is, we've collected maybe hypothetically 1 billion shillings. And our bill or our debt was 76 billion. What is remaining? 75 billion.
Put it back.
Yeah? Okay. Yes, so that we'll be seeing how it is reducing. If one time, because of the good decisions I'm sure the country will make, the price falls from 105 to 100 shillings, they can impose the 3%. If I'm told they've added 3% VAT, it comes to 103 shillings, because let's say it's gone from 105 to 100, then you add 3%, it comes to 103 shillings. I will not complain. I was paying 105, I'm paying 103, I'm saving 2 bob, and the government is getting their 3 bob. So you will find whatever debt it is, by the time you are reaching the 2 years, maybe we'll be almost halfway through. And then, one thing I am sure with the IMFs is this, and the international lenders, and any other lender, if I owe you money and I do not have the capacity to pay you right now, the best option is I pay you immediately. If I cannot pay you, can I come up with a game plan? Can I come up with a plan that 100% guarantees you I'll be paying you, even if I'm paying you a bit slower than I was paying? Okay. So I think that's what the government should do. Stagger this in 4 years more or less, and then in every year do it on a quarterly basis, and then let Wanjiko, the citizens, will be updated. This is how much we owe, and then this is how much it's coming down. Right. I think that would work.
I think that clarity would be very helpful. We'll take a short break, but when we come back, I'd especially like to hear from Weshimiwa on that particular proposal. welcome back. You're watching AM Live in the Market, and I'm joined by several eminent persons on the panel today. To my left is the MGwen Member of Parliament, Alex Kosgei. On his left is Anthony. Oh my goodness.
I'll find you now.
Goodness, I know, right? Okay. Anthony of Green Pencils. To his left is James of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and then George of the Optiven. And we are discussing the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill of 2018, which has been sponsored by Alex. And before we went on the break, we were discussing, Anthony, you were weighing in on the current situation with the debt situation. Yes. And you're saying we're already in a hole. We're discussing this during the break. We're in a hole. Yes. We now need to start focusing on how to get out of the hole. Exactly. And you had a proposal about staggering. The increment. You know, this what we owe. Yes. Why we need to impose this 16% VAT on petroleum. Yes. The reasoning behind it is this huge debt burden that we need to pay, and we have this pressure coming from the IMF. Yes. Alex, you wanted to weigh in on his proposal about staggering it. You say it's inevitable. We have to deal with it at one time or the other. So how do we deal with it?
Well, okay. The proposal that we have to put in place is to cap the debt, first of all, and have a manageable debt for this country. On the other side of the coin is Treasury must also find a way to cut back on its costs. But in terms of what you were mentioning about the VAT, because that's part of the problem, because the need to increase, to have VAT on fuel is being driven by the need to have revenue so as to be able to pay debt and other issues. And on that point, I heard your suggestion that perhaps you could find another way to solve this issue, which are good suggestions. But the thing to say at this point is the decision has already been made. People are discussing this as if no decision has been made. Parliament, which speaks on behalf of the people, have already made it clear that they do not want VAT on fuel, and they are speaking on behalf of the people. This has now been sent to His Excellency the President. It is hoped that he will take the advice, because that is the collective advice of Parliament, and saying that on behalf of the people. It is hoped he will assent to the bill, and therefore hopefully as quickly as possible, because this is a very urgent, critical matter. It's hoped as quickly as possible he will do so, hopefully bring down the fuel. And then after that, we can perhaps discuss other solutions of what Treasury could do. But the idea, and if he doesn't, because there is also an option where if he doesn't want to sign it, he could return it back with his explanation, with a memorandum, and explain to Parliament what he saw as the issue. If he does that, we will study that. We are looking forward to seeing if indeed there is a problem, and we study and see what that memorandum contains. But the mood, in the event of that memorandum, the mood in the country, if you look at the burden that Kenyans are currently facing, and also just generally good economics, you don't keep taxing people to a point where they move forward at all. So the mood will probably be that I think more than 2/3 of MPs at the moment would still wish to have their original decision upheld. And if that happens, then there would be no VAT on fuel. So we are just hoping that we could conclude this process as quickly as possible. When it went to court, what the court said is that the process is not complete, that we are still waiting for a few other steps. Now, we wish that this process could be complete as quickly as possible, because this is an urgent matter. It's keeping the whole country hanging on the balance. We would like to know as quickly as possible. If the bill can be assented to, we wish it could be done even tomorrow or even today. If not, we wish it could come back to the House, and we wish we could be recalled, because at the end of the day, MPs we are always receiving criticism for earning big salaries. So people are ready and willing to work and do these things. So we're willing to meet any time, even tomorrow, the day after, and discuss this thing and see how to reach a solution. So we want to conclude, and that, I think, is important for us to note at this point.
Okay. Just on your bill,
yes.
How did you arrive at the 6 trillion figure as the cap amount?
Yes, that is after having discussions and consultations, but it is just a proposal. The figure of 6 trillion is a proposal of where we should cap our debt at. But obviously, a bill such as this, once it is presented, goes through different stages. It will, hopefully, when the House resumes in October, go to the Finance Committee. They will invite other parties who are interested parties, such as the business community, hopefully, other members of the public, stakeholders, the Treasury, and they may give their views. They may say that they would like the cap to be higher or lower. But I think what is important, after we have taken all those views into account, is for us to reach a consensus of what that cap should be. Because we need to have a figure and say that at this point, we do not wish to exceed this point as a country at the moment. The ceiling can be raised, obviously, in future. Because once you cap a ceiling, you could later bring another amendment to the law and increase it if the need arise. But the hope is that you would create a cap and a ceiling which we can all agree, and we try and live within our means. We try and not have a debt that goes beyond that, and we also try and balance our budget so that whatever we're collecting is what we are able to spend and also what we're able to manage as we move forward.
All right, just one more question on that bill so that we have all our facts on the table. Your bill also proposes that the CS Treasury, should the executive want to incur debt, would be required to appear before the National Assembly and get some sort of approval before going ahead and signing any sort of agreement.
Correct. Yes, because what the amendment also says is that before taking any new loan, they should actually present to the House, to Parliament, the envisioned repayment plan, the projected revenue streams that they're expecting, and how they intend to pay and get an approval prior to signing. Because what has been happening of late is that sometimes loans are just being taken without any of us in the National Assembly or even those in the private sector having a clear idea of which loans were signed. Because loans are signed, they are even...
you're told it's good for you.
Yeah, you're told it has happened and don't even know what exactly has happened.
Okay. James, you wanted to come in. When we were speaking during the break, you expressed a feeling that a lot of these decisions are made and we are locked out of the negotiation room, or rather the stakeholders, who are the Kenyan people who will end up paying this debt anyway, are locked out of those negotiations. Has that been your experience?
Yes, indeed. In fact, I'm a firm believer that which was done in darkness now is out in the open. Parliament met and passed a decision, committed this country, gave a sovereign guarantee to IMF, and that sovereign guarantee is what is going to hurt everybody. There is never been a greater need than this time for proper consultation. And while I hear Mheshimiwa and the members of Parliament's views, we must also face the reality. And the truth is, we have consumed what we borrowed. That's the truth. We have consumed, and he who owes is enslaved to the one who lent the money. So we have to live with that reality, and the truth is, we must now ask ourselves, how do we get out of this problem? The suggestion to withhold this tax, this VAT, is a wishful thinking for us as a country. And I say this because IMF is recalling its debt. They are saying, you know, you promised this, you shelved it once, you must now pay. We have consumed. And unfortunately, not all that money has been consumed for the good reasons that they borrowed it for. As a banker by profession, I know that when we lend money to a certain business, we want to know that if you said you're increasing your stocks, would like to see that reflected from the returns that we see, the bankings that you make. But if you borrow and go and furnish your house and buy new curtains and put a new fence, we will also see that because you borrowed and said you're going to do this. But eventually, you know, we see there's no money coming in, so we say, hey, what happened? And he said, no, I actually painted my house and did a new gate and bought new furniture here. So that is not going to generate money. And that's a big mistake that this country has made over years. That you ignore, you see, if you have a cow that produces a lot of milk, that's a cow you feed first. The others can wait. The one that gives you milk. And in this country, the cow that gives this country milk is a business community. Yeah. We're the biggest taxpayer. And so if you ignore that cow, you're ignoring it at your own risk and peril. And that's why we're in this crunch now. We are damned if we increase this tax, because everything else then has a spiral effect. Because everything has a transport. Bringing this pen to the shop, cost of transport, this cup, this coffee, everything has. So if you increase the cost of fuel, you're actually cutting across everything. There is no way, even the budget that was read becomes useless, because obviously the pricing structure changes completely. So it is up to us now. If we don't, then the sovereign guarantee is going to be recalled.
Okay. All right.
And that puts us even in the situation worse than what Washuri has said, because then if the dollar, the shilling plummets and the dollar goes up, then again it's going to be even more painful now for everything else. So for me, I'm of the opinion that we need a state, a crisis meeting, bringing all the players together. Today, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Today, before it falls. If there is anybody watching me, there, the president, the deputy, the cabinet secretary for treasury, they need to call us for a crisis meeting to determine the way forward. Personally, I think if we are to cut down on some of the expenses that the government goes through, if you removed the fuel guzzlers from the streets, if the ministers who are Kenyans like us are told to pay for their fuel to and from work, like I do, remove that cost of maintaining their car, remove that cost of making unnecessary trips, remove all those luxury trips where, for example, you've had Nairobi MCAs are going to Mombasa for a retreat to discuss how they fired their speaker and so on and so forth. These things, if you really put in austerity measures and cut down your reckless spending, that kitty is enough to start sorting out our problem.
Okay.
And those are real sustainable solutions. This one of pushing it, and so if the government, for example, proved that we have said this is our side of the bargain, then we would say, okay, if you remove all those, that means you'll save 50% of the required amount. Then we are also willing now, as the business community, to salvage our country and come in and meet you halfway down.
Okay.
But not saying ongeza, just keep paying, because that's the easiest thing for this government to do. Pay more taxes and don't.
Say they're in Mombasa for induction. But George,
induction for what?
George, I want you to
they can't be inducted in City Hall. They have a big hall there.
George, I want you to come in at this point.
Yes.
My question is this, which has been raised by James.
Yes.
Are the people who are making these decisions perhaps too cushioned from the realities of everyday life? Could that have contributed to the situation in which we find ourselves? Because they're happy to incur all this debt, but they're not really feeling it.
I think they are in utopia. They don't taste the reality. But before I comment on that, I want to ask Honorable Kosgei that as this bill is proposed, I think they also need to add that even as we borrow and what we have borrowed, the issue of accountability.
Yes.
Because we borrow billions, and if you ask Wajiko or Washuri here, or Moreu, what did the money do? We do not know. Yet, every month we are paying hefty taxes. So that bill needs to give some teeth, either to Auditor General, because I sympathize with the Auditor General, because every time there are scandals upon scandals. Of course, we have seen little action, but we need more action so that we are able to recover the money that is lost. And to pick up maybe on that, they need to address that. Otherwise, we'll keep borrowing, and the money is diverted. And maybe you're talking about solutions here. Another solution I give government is that the people who have taken the previous loans to enrich themselves, we saw in the news, a clerk earning 90,000 has an account of 1 billion. That money is here in Kenya. Those assets are here.
Yes.
Why can't we recover? Because that is public money, and then that money goes to treasury.
Yes.
The 72 billion they are looking for from VAT, we can get it from the thieves that have been stealing our taxes.
Absolutely.
It's as easy as that. And then for the government to involve the taxpayers like Optven here and the rest of the private sector, let them call us. We have solutions.
Yes.
Maybe one of the things that maybe we, as a people of Kenya, maybe we need entrepreneurs in treasury.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we have technocrats that have done economics. So maybe some of these things are theoretical. So they're only saying borrow, borrow, borrow. But we're going to generate our own resources. We finance our own activities. And we have a dignity. Right now, Chinese can call us monkeys.
Yes.
Because the borrower has no choices.
Yes.
All right.
100%. 100%. I could agree with this guy more. 100%. Spot on.
It's giving you a thumbs up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Mheshimiwa here, when he spoke, he said one part is to cap one side of the coin is to cap how much we need to borrow. The other side of the coin is to rein in on our expenses. I want to put, the coin has 3 faces.
Three?
Yes.
Okay.
It does?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
This side, and then
okay, all right.
the circumference. Yes. The third part of the coin is, much as Treasury is capping its expenses, it also needs to look at its income. And you look at our trade balance, it's negative, despite all the resources we have. Now, one of the things that we need to do, we keep on talking about employment, employment, employment. And one of the big 4 is manufacturing. I hope the president is watching, or someone close to him, or the deputy president, and I'm happy there's someone here from parliament. I think one good solution to spike the manufacturing sector, to grow almost instantly from zero, an exponential growth is, there's something called there's a department in, I think, the Ministry of Lands. It's called the Supplies Branch. The Supplies Branch supplies government entities, ministries, parastatals, with a lot of products. Now, I think what the CS of industrialization, Mheshimiwa Munya, what he should do, he should talk to his counterpart in Ministry of Lands. They get a list of what the Supplies Branch bought last year, all the items they bought, the quantities they bought, and the prices at which they bought. And share that list with Kenya Association of Manufacturers. If that list is too big, let's flip the coin to the other side. Let them go to Kenya Association of Manufacturers. What do you manufacture here in the country?
Yes.
Kenya's manufacturers will give them a list. These are the things we've been manufacturing. With that list, they'll take it now. Mheshimiwa Munya will take it to his counterpart, Mheshimiwa Farida Karonei, the one in charge of Supplies Branch, and now tell Supplies Branch, these are the things that have been manufactured in Kenya. Can you tell us, of these items, how many were bought? Sorry, how many did you buy last year? At what prices and what quantities? Once we have that list, it's given back to CAM. Now, hypothetically speaking, let's say they bought 1 million chairs, or let's say 10,000 chairs. But the capacity of the industries in Kenya can only make 1,000 chairs. Yet they bought 10,000 chairs. Let those people who manufacture the chairs be allowed to manufacture the 1,000 chairs and supply them to government. The 9,000, let them import from China or wherever else they import. I can assure you of one thing. As a businessman, he's a businessman. If we know our capacity right now is making 1,000 chairs, but the market is 10,000 chairs.
We'll increase the capacity.
He's finishing for me. Even if I will not meet the capacity in the first year, within 2 or 3 years, we will meet that 10,000 chairs. And then that way, when we're doing that, will I make them myself? Will Bwana George make them by himself? No. We'll have to employ. Yes. So you see, the market is already there. So that's one thing they need to do. Another thing that we need to do is what we call unbundling. What do I mean by that? In most of the government parastatals or entities, including the ministries, they'll give you a tender. We want chairs, we want desks, we want safes, we want cabinets. But I do not have the capacity of making such tables, stools, cabinets, and all that. Me, I can only make the chairs. So what happens? I am locked out. Let them do, when they realize whatever is bought in Kenya, they do what we call unbundling. Unbundle the contract. Open it up. So that guy who is making the chairs is now not forced to supply what he cannot be able to supply. Then that way, after we reach from 1,000 shares, we go to reach the 10,000 shares. Let me tell you, we start looking. By that time, our financial status will be good. We start looking. Can we start making the stools and tables? And then the last thing is what we say, buy and pay. They should pay us. For instance, without mentioning which county, last week, 2 years passed since we supplied some products to a certain county. The 2-year mark passed last year. The finance guys are saying you need to give us 25% of what you supplied.
For them to facilitate.
Yes. That's corruption.
It is.
Now,
have you reported it to the authorities?
No, you see, unfortunately, when somebody comes and tells you, that the authorities themselves. We've spoken to some people within the county, and I'm happy now they have a new CFO, and we told him, and now he's told us, I will try to make sure you guys get paid, hopefully before the end of the year. Right. But there's no money that has come in. So when money comes in, we will pay you.
Yeah, the counties were speaking yesterday, and they were saying they don't even have money in some counties to pay workers, and they might be forced to lay them off. James, I saw you taking notes furiously.
Yes, yes.
And like a certain photo we were speaking about earlier on social media.
Yeah, because I think these guys are speaking to my heart, and I'm happy that we are seeing. Even I didn't actually know that a coin has 3 sides, which is very good.
Actually, it does.
but I completely agree with Anthony and even with George here, because we are at a very defining moment in the country. We have had a reality check. Actually, this is a reality check for us, and we must tell ourselves, if you go to a doctor and he diagnoses you with cancer level 4. Which is what I think we have been diagnosed with. It is now your decision to live on by looking at how you can go around that cancer. And some of what Anthony has said is really giving the solutions. We got into this ditch because of ignoring the people who really mattered. All what George has said, Anthony has said, is not rocket science. It's not something that has just suddenly dropped from heaven for us to decipher. It's something that is known. It's known to us, the business community. What he's saying is right in my heart. But if you asked me, before we got in there, we should have remedied this situation. Affirmative action. If you look at a country like India, why is India today growing exponentially? Because they closed themselves. They said, no. Let us manufacture what we need here. Let us ignore what is out there. Let us manufacture. If you look at what is made in India, it looks clumsy. It doesn't look beautiful. But is it functional? Yes, it is. They are pumped to the end of your life, not their life. I mean, there are people who installed Indian pumps when the kids, their grandfathers, the pump is still kicking. So we are looking at solutions that make sense to us. If you look at a government that has completely ignored, if I were sitting in Treasury today, for example, the 3 or 4 things that I would do quickly is what you have said. Let's look at what we must import is only what we will import.
Yes.
What we can do. If today, for example, we said no more importation of new clothes, what will that mean? We will not go back to the leaves.
No.
All that will mean is our cotton industry then must kick in. We must start planting cotton. Yes? For us to be able to weave this shirt and whatever. And that means we have created a new employment area. Then the ginneries will come in and people will start weaving clothes. All right? That's another industry that grows. Then Kikomi, Rivertex, and Raymonds will all come back to life. And we'll start making our own clothes. And that way, if you look at the value chain, what creation, what job creations you've done from encouraging the coffee farmer in Wendo and Kisumu to start growing, cotton, to ginneries in Nakuru, to cutting. If you look at what we're exporting to AGOA, we are importing material to come and make the clothes that we send to AGOA. We export to America. After 10 years, it's returned to us as mitumba, and we run and buy. And you find made in Kenya. So we have refused to do the right thing. What are we saying? This is what we are saying here is not news. It's not rocket science. It is a decision that needs to be made by the government. And they say, from now on, we're going to encourage buy Kenya, build Kenya. We have Jua Kali here in Gikomba, the biggest SMEs that are really producing quality products. If you want that nyamachoma thing that lasts forever is cast and made there in thingy. But have we paid attention to them? No. We have ignored our industry. And we are here saying manufacturing. What are we talking about manufacturing? If we cannot start by encouraging the Jua Kali to improve their standards, to compete with the international market and produce. If I were Minister for Treasury, remove taxes on machinery that will encourage them to improve their quality and go out there and compete internationally. And that way then you spur real sustainable economic activity. So that if you now even put those Jua Kalis into formal sectors, you can now be able to collect taxes from those guys. Because from where we sit as Kenya National Chamber, we have enough market out there for export. We are present in 177 countries around the world. And we can create market for this Jua Kali only if we can improve the quality, because we are not now competing within Kenya. We now raise the standards to compete outside there. If you're looking at other products that are made from here, it is a question of the government waking up to the reality that you cannot live in theory anymore. Come down from cloud 9 to reality. Okay. And let's discuss this. Let's talk to each other. Let's look at this as a critical defining moments for our country. And we'll be saying, let's get solutions. He's got solutions. He's got solutions. I've got solutions. Mheshimiwa has solutions. But we need to sit together and say, what do we do for this great country of ours that we love so much? Because if it's mortgaged, I can tell you, none of us will be safe. We will be called monkeys, as some of us have been called. We will be trodden on.
Those comments really touched our
They were so raw in our system that we need actually to decide also, finally, whether we need even these Chinese fellows here. Let them give us loans and stay there. Yes. If they give us loans, they stay there. We deal with our problems here locally.
Okay. Yes. I think their position was that, those were just that particular individual's biases.
Yes. No. Let me also tell you, that's not the truth. The truth is, if you go to SGR today and interview those people who work under the Chinese, they are so upset with these people because they paid you, they kick you around, they get out, they are so bad to Kenyans. And I've received, I can show you after this, I'll show you complaints I've received from SGR staff saying, please get so and so out of here. He is so bad. He will slap people because they have employed you. They are running the railway as though it is in China. This is our asset. We are going to pay for it. We are paying for it. They are blackmailing us, and I cannot put it beyond them to even misappropriate some of that money. You cannot lend me money, and then also be the one to manage what I'm collecting, and I don't get to see it. Okay. When will I pay this debt?
It's a perception that I think President Xi Jinping sought to correct or sort of address when we had African leaders in China for the forum on China-Africa cooperation. And there was a percentage of money he said they would give interest-free. So have we been a bit unfair?
Carrot and stick.
Carrot and stick. Yes, they're dangling it so that you get deeper into the problem.
Yes. Okay, Alex. Alex, you spoke of mood.
Yes.
Public mood.
Yes.
Have you heard from your constituents?
Yes, I have. Could I comment first on what they said? Because all three of them actually made very important points about the private sector and the need to support the private sector, because that is actually what's going to drive this economy forward. And we hope that people at Treasury could pay attention and at least try and give them that support that they need. Kenyans are actually an incredibly hard-working group of people.
You're right.
And they are very, very industrious, very, very productive. Go anywhere, you'll find people walking, moving to work from very, very early in the morning. And one of the funny things is that, if you travel...
we're here.
Yes. If you travel actually sometimes to even other African countries or some other places, one of the things that you can find strange, that you realize you can wake up at 5 and there's nobody walking or going anywhere. But in Kenya, people will work hard, they are busy, and they are productive. And if you just give them that support and you just give them a bit of a push in the right direction, you'll have a fantastic economy that will be booming tomorrow. And even then, now that will generate the revenue that the KRA needs to pay other things and to move forward. What they should stop doing is trying to tax people and giving them more and more burdens and more trouble, and then expecting that we're going to have that growth that we're all hoping for. So that I think is a very important point. I totally agree with you, all of you three, about the need to support the private sector, and I hope that will eventually happen.
And I think people generally across the world appreciate that Kenyans are very hardworking individuals. I remember I was interviewing Jendai Fraser, who's a former U.S. Secretary for Africa, and it was just after the election, and she was like, she's confident that Kenya's economy will rebound because Kenyans are hardworking. But have you heard from those hardworking Kenyans?
Yes.
What feedback have you gotten from your constituents?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my constituents and all Kenyans in general, the burden of taxation is becoming a bit too much for them. I mean, obviously, the cost of living is getting out of hand. Everybody is becoming increasingly aware that there is this debt. In the beginning, I think there was less and less awareness, and perhaps also because of the huge political season. But after the election period now has died down, and now we come back to reality of trying to see how we can deliver jobs for the people, how we can be able to help them have a better life and move forward. They are very aware that this is now an issue, and it is part of the reason why I'm moving forward with this proposal to amend the PFM to try and cap this debt. But as I said, that's only one side of the coin. The other side is what they've just said, to support the private sector, and then also government cuts its spending. And in that way, we will hopefully be able to make the lives of my constituents, Kenyans in general, start getting better, and they start having more opportunities and a better way to live moving forward.
Okay. James, you said we're at a critical stage. You talked about stage 4 cancer. But why, other than on Twitter, I don't know, I haven't seen Kenyans that vocal on this issue of being heavily taxed. Is it because we don't have an understanding, or we don't appreciate just how much tax we pay? I know in the US, when you go to shop, there's a sticker price. But then now when you get to the counter, now you're told, okay, that's because, you know, in Kenya you used to, that's the sticker price, that's what I'll pay. You get to pay to the pay point, and then you're told, oh, okay, now plus tax.
The tax.
Now this is however much more you have to pay. Do you think, I don't know, I have this sense of, you know, everybody is saying, oh, it's critical, it's critical. You know, the other day we were lining up to, or we were queuing to access petrol because just immediately the 16% VAT came in force, but still there was this passivity about it.
No, let me tell you, with due respect to Kenyans, I think we have taken too much for too long, and this is where we are in now. We have actually reached that critical stage. You know, cancer stage 1 can be dealt with, stage 2, stage 3. At stage 4, it's touch and go. If you come back, hallelujah. If you don't, then the chances are you're tipping over the other side. Why I said we're in cancer stage 4 is because we ignored the telltale signs. You know, debt starts telling you stories very early. And I'm saying this because I've talked about it here in AM Live. I flagged the issue of the growing debt, and particularly debt that is directed into consumption, not production. See, if you borrow for consumption, and banks got into trouble, I wouldn't name the bank, but there's a bank that started lending people with pay slips and the unsecured loans, because you come with a pay slip, you're given 500,000, you go, then after that they put you in trouble. That's where we are as a country. We've just been taking money. And like what George said, when you're in utopia, you're not in touch with the reality. The reality is this money will be paid at some point. So even when the Chinese come with briefcases and saying, who else wants money? I want. You take. For what?
Okay.
For fueling our tax, for fueling our guzzlers, or for thinking? What I want to say is, the comparative we have here is, and the choice we are faced with is, we continue with the tax increase, we increase tax on this, tax on this, tax on this, which is very short-term solutions, or we bite the bullet, drop everything else, and concentrate on increasing production. And the moment you bring in production, you are creating a sustainable economy that will far outlive and obliterate your tax obligations. In fact, countries, there's empirical evidence that countries that have embraced production have quickly gotten out of trouble. And if you look at the countries that we started at par back in 1963 at the turn of independence, look at Malaysia, look at Korea, look at Singapore, all those countries were at par with us. What did Lee Kuan Yew, for example, in Singapore do? He spurred production. He brought everybody. All the big producers were domiciled in Singapore. Where is Singapore today? Where are we today?
Right.
That is the
and I want to get to the sparring production. Alex, I see you have a comment to make. But if I could just bring in the people who are watching us from their places of work, on their way to work, from home. So just a few thoughts. As I mentioned a bit earlier, the hashtag is AM Live. We are discussing the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill 2018. Yes, and the hashtag is also the hashtag is AM Live. We have AM Live NTV. You can also tweet us on that, and also tweet us on NTV Kenya. Mine is at Olive Burrows. Alex, you said your Twitter handle is? Sorry?
Keegan Kosgei.
Keegan Kosgei. Yes, and
Anthony.Kirori.
Anthony.Kirori.
James.Mureu.
James.Mureu. And George?
Optiven.
George Optiven. All right, yes. So just a few thoughts. People agreeing with you. We have Masai Gal, who says the major problem with developing economies like Kenya is that they want to invest in flashy projects and ignore Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yet a country like US took 200 years to be where they are today, and we are infants compared to them, and the rising debts testify to that. Kennedy Omogi says, differentiate the kind of orientation we have. It's not people-centered. The policies are not done around the masses' needs. And then we have Jacob Abere Matlala, who says, is the administration listening to James Mureu as he comes out revenue, loans and debt weakness that need to be rejuvenated, or are they well, yeah, hopefully they're listening. I'll leave the rest. Again, it's at AM Live NTV, at AM Live NTV, or at NTV Kenya, or any of the gentlemen here, or myself at O Burrows. Yes, Alex, you wanted to come in.
No, just a small joke, because actually from what you were saying, you know, there is, you were asking Kenyans complaining. You know, Kenyans don't usually, they're not complaining a lot, but they can definitely sense the problem. And this problem is getting worse slowly by slowly. And there is a joke that that goes that, you know, a frog, it's a true thing. A frog, if you put it in water and you boil the water slowly, the frog will sit in the water and slowly die. It'll just it feels the water is getting warm, it's enjoying the heat, and it doesn't know that it's boiling in water. But the same frog, if the water is boiling hot and you throw it inside, it'll immediately jump out, because it'll immediately know that this is hot boiling water. Now, our problem in Kenya is slowly getting worse and worse. But it's because it's happening so slowly that some people don't realize how bad it is. If you had just taken us back, say, 5-10 years ago, and then somebody from 10 years ago just appears right now and looks at how things are, they would wonder what exactly happened. And that is the thing that we need to try and realize at the moment and see how we can address. And I hope that usually first by A, capping the debt, and B, some of the suggestions that have come out today, we would then be able to end this problem and perhaps now begin a movement towards the right direction. Okay,
how far have you gotten in lobbying for support from your fellow legislators? Who have you spoken to? Is your sentiment shared across the board, or are you feeling isolated?
No, I mean, I have spoken to a large number of members of parliament. I have, obviously the bill is now with the speaker. When the House resumes in October, it is hoped that it will then go to the Finance Committee, and then we will have interaction with stakeholders. And so far, I think there's an agreement, or at least I feel there's a good support from other members of parliament. But it's a continuous process between now up until the time when it reaches the floor of the House. And I just hope that, you know, slowly by slowly, we will be able to get that broad-based consensus and agreement that we need to be able to pass it into law. But the bill itself, as I keep saying, is just one aspect. The other aspects are really what they've also said. You also need to support the private sector, and reduce government spending.
Okay, George, I want you to come in. Now, we're being told no reason to panic. That's what the Deputy President was saying. You know, we'll sit down, we'll discuss. Of course, James's issue is that he's not, rather the business community is not in the room of these discussions.
Yes, that's
but
the truth.
you know that, I mean, the DP is saying, you know, this is all well thought out. We just didn't wake up and sign agreements willy-nilly. We actually intend to spur economic growth through this investment in our infrastructure. Are you convinced that it'll pay off?
I think I'm not convinced as a business person or a Kenyan person, because this huge money that is being mentioned in trillions, I think they talk about 5 trillion in loans. If we can ask somebody to account for that money, you know, tell us the 5 trillion, what did we do? You'll be shocked to find maybe 40% went to people's pockets. So, and since as Kenyan people, we are wise people, we are hardworking people, we want to see, as Mheshimiwa said, results. What did the money do? That's why Kenyans are feeling pain, because we are paying taxes. We cannot account what the money did. Of course, you can see the SGR, but you see now the repercussions. We cannot see that money. We cannot manage. Our young people are being harassed when they're working there. So that's the pain of Wanjiko and us in business people. So we are not convinced that we consulted, we are okay. And as James said, I think it's a high time we now rethink of, we are already in a hole, in a slimy hole actually. How do we come out of this hole? And it's a duty of every Kenyan. That's why we encourage the government to involve the private sector, not them locking themselves in the ministers and discussing. They may not know what the poor person in Kieni, in Nyeri where I come from, the pain they are undergoing when they pay these massive taxes. They don't know the pain of entrepreneurs who are closing down their businesses because they cannot borrow, they cannot sustain the cash flows because the economy is shrinking. But as somebody said, Kenyans are resilient, they are hardworking. Our word of encouragement to Kenyan people, we should not give up. We should keep talking, encourage the government to involve us, and also to work harder. You know, the other day I saw some results. I was in the US for a while, and I saw a survey from the US. They were saying the Kenyan people are rated number 3. When they go for the interviews, somebody here is a Kenyan, they are employed. The same with Australia. That means we have a culture of hard work. And we encourage the government to encourage us to work harder. As we work harder, we pay more taxes. That's what we're asking for.
Okay. Yes. Anthony, what about those people who argue that the troubles we are facing is just, you know, it's part of the global economics, that generally the economy globally is not thriving. What do you say to those who argue that position?
I will say that is lazy thinking, and that's not good, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, because let me give a few examples. Look at Japan, Singapore. What's common with those two countries that I've mentioned? They have almost zero natural resources. Yet their quality of life is so high because they have to import almost everything that they have to import, but they export a lot. Look at the number of cars on the road. Almost every other car is a Japanese car. We have a lot of the resources. They get some of the resources from here. So what's the difference between the Japanese and us? I'm sorry, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, they're thinking more than us. It's not that we don't have the same brain matter. We do. It's just that we have been lazy. For instance, when Mheshimiwa here was talking about the issue of the frog, I remember something that really worries me a lot. And he depicted it very well, talking about the frog boiling. I love statistics. You can't run away from facts. In 1949, the world population reached 3 billion. In 1999, we hit 6 billion. The 7 billion mark, the world population reached the 7 billion mark in October 2011. It is projected by the year 2050 will be about 10 billion. That's what we are told. However, on other studies, especially when it comes to agriculture and food production, it is said that the way the world is, it will be able to feed about 9 billion people. When we go to 10 billion people, now we are stretching things. But in 2050, we've been guaranteed will be 10 billion plus. Now, I remember when we were kids, we used to be, there was a time I watched some documentary, and some Wazungus came, and some Europeans came and said that if Central Province itself, if it was managed properly, it will be able to feed Kenya and a good portion of Britain. Now, let's look at Central Province right now. What are we doing with it? We are uprooting coffee estates, and we are converting it into a jungle, a concrete jungle. The Nairobi Metropolitan, it's a good idea, but it's, I think, it's lazy thinking. We didn't think things through. Because, with all due respect, I think the residential estates should have been taken to areas that are not agriculturally productive. For instance, without mentioning the names, there's a big estate development, residential industry development, thousands of acres, somewhere within Kiambu County. I'm not mentioning anybody here. There was a time they called us for some meeting, and they showed us a number of slides. When they finished, I told them, can you go back to a specific slide? You could see a lot of red soil being dug. And then I told them, put that slide there. Now let's see the final slide. They're showing us the before and after. So I told them, look at these statistics. All these people, where will they get their food from? Why don't you, with all due respect, remove this from here and take it to another place that's not agriculturally productive? We are boiling we are the frog boiling. We'll reach 2050 and we'll have a lot of concrete jungles around us. And then guess what? Oops, we don't have a place to get our food from. Okay. Have we been bright?
George, let you get your response to that.
No.
Okay, Jay.
Let me say this, and I know George will fight, but me, I want to differ with Anthony a bit, because you see, you must then get to the genesis of why the farmer feels comfortable uprooting his coffee and putting up a concrete jungle. And it's a middleman syndrome. This country is gone through the middleman syndrome. The people who negotiate loans for us and the people who deliver those loans are sitting in the middle there. They know what they negotiated from Burrows there to George. So me, I know I got it at 100. I got it at 100 shillings. I'm giving to him at 500 shillings, and I'm meanwhile making 400 shillings. That is a simple. Now, if you look at the odd farmer in Kiambu here, with his 10 acres of coffee, after toiling and looking after this coffee for a long, long time, what does he collect? A few bags of coffee, which Anthony here comes and buys at a paltry sum of money, and goes and sells that coffee or tea to Britain, all right, at a huge markup. And Britain, who don't have a bush, one coffee bush or tea bush, re-export that tea back to Kenya as Earl Grey, Lipton tea, and what have you. And the farmer can only read that name in the supermarket. He can't touch it because it's too expensive. He's the one who grew it, went through a middleman, went and got processed in UK. It's brought back as Lipton tea and Earl Grey and all that. And now he's looking at it and saying, hii chai ya kutoka wapi? It was his tea that went out there. Why can't we now as a country decide that we are going to ban tea exports and produce it, send it as a finished product from this country?
Exactly.
And that way then the farmer knows he's going to get the right price. But for now, I can tell you, the concrete jungle is going to continue growing because it makes economic sense to have a block of flats here where coffee was sitting, and I'm sure every end of month I have 200,000-300,000 in my pocket. That is the difference. It's just pure economics. It's not rocket science. It's not about... Now, I wanted to weigh in on something else. Do you know what the Japanese debt ratio is? It starts at 200% debt. Yes, Rakali. What's the lifestyle of a Japanese person? 1,000 times better than the Kenyan person. Why? Because they manage their debt. They know how to service their debts. They have gone into production. So even if you went into a huge debt, as long as you know how you're going to meet that debt, then there's no problem. The government goes into debt, but doesn't care how it's going to meet the debt obligation. The debt obligation is met by another person. And that's the disconnect that we're talking about. And it must be addressed as a matter of urgency.
Okay. George, I wanted you to respond to Anthony's
I think
comments.
I've responded.
Are you satisfied with that response?
Is talking about Optiven. We have massive projects in Kiambu, of course. But as James says, it's a matter of economics. You know, farming of today is not about the soil, it's about the technology. Optiven, we are doing farming in Kajiado, and we are producing the best tomatoes and the best capsicum, greenhouse farming. So that's a discussion on another day, whether Kiambu or Kajiado. But it's change of technology. But as Kenyan people, I like one thing: we are very resilient, and I think as we discuss these issues in this particular panel, you find change of mindset. And I'm happy that we also have a listening government. A few times we have discussed issues and they have picked them up. They only think that this particular time a decision was made 2013. We have a new president, and as James said, it's a catch-22. Do we say no to VAT and then the leaders say we pull the whoever says cash 22? So we have to keep rethinking, even after these panel discussions, we keep rethinking of solutions that we can be able to have as a Kenyan people, because all said and done, this is home.
Yes.
We go nowhere.
Yes.
You know, the other day I was traveling to a certain country and I was denying a visa. I discovered I'm happy to be a Kenyan. So we must make this country to be a better country.
Absolutely.
And we have a chance.
Absolutely.
We have
Absolutely.
massive resources
Yeah.
in this particular country, not only in Kenya, in Africa. And this is a call for all African leaders. I think we are more of begging. You know, we keep begging. Yet, these people, they are coming to our countries and they are flying with the resources,
yes.
raw materials to go and
Yes,
produce.
yes.
And as African leadership, we need to go back to our minds and replan again what Africa is all about. Because every Muzungu, I happen to travel a lot, every Muzungu who comes to Kenya or to Africa, they refuse to go back. Actually, they marry our ladies.
Yes.
To be able to live here longer. That means we have what it takes. It's the issue of managing the resources that God has given us. And once we do that, we shall fly high like eagles.
All right, George.
Yes.
In the interest of fairness, gentlemen, James, your position is that, you know, the business community needs to be in the room. You know, business community, of course, including George and Anthony. You make up the business community represented by the chamber. But then, as Kenyans, you elected these people. You trusted these people to make these decisions for you. We can't all be in the room. And we are the same Kenyans who, when we submit tenders, we submit exorbitant figures. We are the same Kenyans who, even when we submit exorbitant figures, you know, we had NYS1 and NYS2, we don't supply.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, are we abdicating our roles? Are we all just pointing finger at Serikali and then sitting back and not looking, or rather sort of reflecting on what our role could be in the situation we are in?
Let me tell you, you are spot on. By the way, this corruption takes two hands. It takes two hands to clap. So there is a corruption, the corrupter and the corruptee, if I may use those two words. If I want to go and get a deal, cut a deal, obviously I'm going to speak to Anthony here and we discuss and agree on what's his share, what's my share, what do we exploit from the Mwananchi. All right? That is a deal that has been cut. That is what I don't agree. That is what I think this government should be punishing painfully. Now look at the way we handle corruption. How many people have, I mean, last month there was a lot of hype. So and so is going, so and so is going. But again, in that confusion, everybody escapes. Everybody escapes. So I have been, again, I'm on record as having said, if you want to eradicate corruption, because that is where we're bleeding from. And I want to put a very, you know, dramatic expression of this corruption. If you have this cup with an 8-inch pipe removing and a 2-inch pipe pouring in, and assuming the 2-inch pipe is the tax collection you're doing and the little money that you're putting in, with a 2-inch pipe, like water, 2-inch pipe, and you're extracting with an 8-inch pipe, will this cup ever get full?
Never, ever.
That is how we are now. That we are putting in, the taxes we collect from everybody, we take, graciously we take, albeit from only 17% of the Kenyans. That's another very sad thing. And why are Kenyans not paying taxes? Because the compliance levels are very low. Because KRA knows Mureu, George, hammer them, keep hammering. They're the ones, they will never want to widen the bracket. The bracket. They deepen it. They get Mureu, they dig Mureu into the last coin. And yet there are many Kenyans there. If KRA is only collecting 17% taxes, what are we saying? What would they do with the 87 if they only removed this? Because you see, also KRA lives in a silo of its own. They are actually, it is impossible to access the Kenya Revenue Authority, Times Towers, even when you are going to pay them.
You're right.
I've seen taxpayers being rained on outside. Well, Mheshimiwa, you want to rain on this. They are waiting, they are queuing at the end of the month to pay taxes. But because these guys live in a glass house, they wait outside there. You queue, you go, you find people who are, you're going to pay taxes to. And they're arrogant and they are not responsive to the needs of the Mwananchi. So what we are saying is, we need a complete makeover of this whole ecosystem, where the private sector comes in and and really read the riot act to the person who is collecting this money on our behalf. Because we cannot keep giving, and you are steadfastly holding your 2-inch pipe over this bucket, and somebody else is on the other side waiting with an 8-inch pipe extracting. It is not practically possible. So what is my suggestion? Corruption. If today I am caught with a corruption case and I'm taken to court and there is actual evidence, you know, you also start looking for evidence. Chief, you are caught, like you've said, your salary is 90,000. Your account has 1.7 billion shillings in your account. Please tell us where you got this money from, where did you borrow it from? And if there is that evidence, and you are in the supplies department, clearly there is something you are doing wrong in that department.
Okay.
So there is evidence you are corrupt. Take you to court in the morning.
Pay.
No. Take you to court, freeze your account, take you to court. You are tried in the afternoon, you are appealing. Tomorrow morning, you are jailed and all assets recovered. Finished.
Right.
And if you did that, corruption will be people will be running away from corruption.
Unfortunately, gentlemen, I have to end the conversation on that note, but a few responses to your thoughts just before we close the conversation. Real quick, we have yes, we have Kasoa Kole, who says at AM Live TV, at Olive Burrows, at George Optiven, very true that the borrower has no choices, but Kenya does have choices and the answers are available locally. Let the stakeholders meet, otherwise the frog will stay in the boiling pan until the evaporation will start burning the crops. We have another Roy of the Ambo, actually Alex is not convinced your proposal will get very far. He says I feel bribes will do some magic like the other time in Parliament. Yes, then we have Benson, who says that decades of foolish borrowing, that is borrowing to eat, has led us straight into this abyss, and now the chicken are coming home to roost. And he quotes a Bible verse, Proverbs 22:7. Somebody will need to confirm this one for me. And he says it states that the borrower is a slave to the lender. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. Emmanuel Rono wants to congratulate you, Alex. He says he's your constituent. He says, I do want to congratulate my MP. Well done. But I just want him to come out to the grassroots and educate his voters on the Public Management Act. And I don't know, this is the actual Honorable William Kabogo, who says is it not MPs that are taxing us? And finally, we have one from Jen, I don't know this, Jen Seve, okay. Yeah, the money borrowed has benefited the chosen few, but not all Kenyans. To raise more money, start by taxing all politicians, including the president himself. Lots of thoughts. I could only read just a few. I'm sure, gentlemen, when you get a moment to go through some of those responses and reply. With those you agree, maybe correct the misconceptions that may be out there. But thank you very much for your time. Alex Kosgei, who is the MP from Mgwen, thank you very much for making the time. All the best with the Public Finance Management Bill 2018. We hope to keep in touch with you and see how that goes. Anthony, oh my gosh, Anthony, I got it right. Finally. From Green Pencils, thank you very much for coming and teaching us a few things, including the 3 sides of the coin. James, thank you very much. James Umura from the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much. A very interesting point you've made, and I like that you carried your notebook and your pen. And yes, George, I see. Is that a tab? No, a phone? You are using your phone? Okay, you have a notebook. George from Optiven, thank you very much as well for joining us. That's it for AM Live. Stay tuned for Living with Us.